In this video, I'll demonstrate how to execute and interpret a Pearson's R and a simple bivariate regression. First, let's start with Pearson's R. So let's start with the hypothesis. Our hypothesis in this instance can be concerned about crime leads to the number of precautions taken to prevent crime. So in this example, I'm working with the fear data set. Let's examine our variables that coincide with the hypothesis. So how concerned about crime are you? So we look at it and it's 0 to 10, so that's 11 categories. Technically this is an ordinal, but since it has enough values, we'll consider it metric ordinal. And because we'll treat it like metric ordinal, it'll be okay for a regression. And then last, we'll look at behavioral precautions taken to prevent crime. So that is a combination of 3 items summed together, and this is also metric ordinal. Actually, it's 3 ratio level variables added together and summed together, and so this is a continuous variable as well. Prior to running the Pearson's R, we need to diagnose or analyze each of the variables independently. So let's look at the descriptive statistics for each. So I'll click Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and then Frequencies. When the frequency dialog box appears, I'm going to choose our 2 variables, how concerned about crime in general. I'll move it over, and then I go near the bottom here, and I find the behavioral precautions, and then I move it over. In examining each of these variables independently, or at the univariate level, I'm looking to see if each is normal or not. So I'm going to go to the statistics button and I'll choose mean, median, mode, skewness and kurtosis, and standard deviation. I'll click continue at the bottom of, and then when I get to this dialog box, I'll click OK. SPSS will generate the frequencies, and the first piece of output is a descriptive statistics box for each of the variables requested. So I noticed that the mean, median are fairly close in both instances to one another, and the mode is also fairly close. So I can be sure that this is probably normally distributed. This might be a tad bit skewed, and so I go down to the skewness value for how concerned about crime in general, and it's negative 0.934, and the kurtosis is 0.223. Since both are within the +1, -1 range, we'll consider this tolerably normal. And then I'll look at behavioral precautions, and the skewness is 0.167, and the kurtosis is 0.057. And so again, even though neither of these variables have a 0, 0 skewness and kurtosis, they're within the +1, -1 range, and so we'll consider them tolerably normal. And then below this will just be the frequency distribution tables for each variable. So now I'm going to assess the linearity of the relationship. To do that, I'll generate a scatter plot with a line of best fit. To do so, I'll go to the Graphs feature, Legacy Dialogs, and then I scroll down to Scatter Dot. I click it, and this appears. I want to make sure that Simple Scatter has the dark outline, and then I'll click the Define button. My independent variable is how concerned about crime in general are you. So I'm going to move that to the x-axis. That's normally where you would plot the independent variable, and the dependent variable typically is plotted on the y-axis. That's at the bottom of the list here. So then I'll move it up into that box and then click OK. I'll wait for SPSS to execute the command to generate the graph. I scroll down, so now I'm going to request a line of best fit. So I'm going to double click the graph. I'll go up to the top menu bar and I hover over this button, and it said add fit line at total. I click it and it asks me what kind of line, and just make sure linear is radial dial is checked and click close, and then close the chart editor. So notice here that if I were to draw an envelope around the points, it would be fairly oblong. It would be oblong but not thin, but wide instead. So this is going to indicate visually that this is probably going to be a weak correlation. Notice how many points fall away from the line rather than close to or on it. And that the best line, or excuse me, and that the line of best fit is fairly flat rather than steep. So now I'll request a Pearson's R. To do so, I go to the Analyze on the menu bar. Then I click the Correlate option, or hover over it, and then I choose the bivariate. So I add the two variables that I'd like. I make sure the default Pearson is checked. It's going to give me a two-tailed p-value, and it will flag significant correlations with asterisks. Then I click OK, and I wait for SPSS to generate the output. This is referred to as a correlation matrix. It has two variables, but notice how that there are 4 cells with values in it. So here's our diagonal that we talked about in the lesson notes. And these are the values that we're concerned with, the correlations. So how concerned are you about crime in general? And then I scroll over to the column with the dependent variable, behavioral precautions taken as a result of concern about crime, and that the value is 0.291. So this is the Pearson's R. To obtain the strength of the association, I would need to square this value. 0.291 squared equals 0.085. So that explains 8.5% of the variation in the dependent variable. So concern about crime explains 8.5% of the variance in behavioral precautions taken as a result of concern about crime. Notice that this direction of the relationship is positive, and so as concern increases, the number of behavioral precautions also increase, and that the probability is also significant. It's less than 0.001. So this is a significant relationship. It's positive, but the magnitude is fairly small.